Ellis was 36 years old, a senior loan officer at the Cleveland Rock Valley Credit Union, and he made a solid $89,000 a year. It was a good life, a stable life, built on the steady principles of amortization schedules and credit scores. He understood numbers. He believed in them. But on Sunday, October 15th, at precisely 2:34 p.m., his entire life was redefined by a 63-second audio file that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with betrayal. He was sitting in the worn, comfortable armchair in the living room of his Tremont condo, a place he'd bought for $220,000 long before he met his wife, Kenya. The autumn light, the color of weak tea, filtered through the large windows overlooking Lincoln Park. He was reading a well-worn copy of a biography on Cleveland's first black mayor, a book he'd paid $14.99 for at a local bookstore. His phone, a 3-year-old Samsung that he saw no reason to upgrade, buzzed on the solid oak-end table beside him. A new voicemail. He assumed it was his mother, checking in. He smiled, put his book down, and tapped the notification. The robotic voice of the service announced the time of the message. Then, he heard his wife's voice. But it wasn't for him. It was conspiratorial, laced with a triumphant giggle he hadn't heard directed at him in years. "Tasha, girl, you are not going to believe this." Kenya's voice sang, crackling slightly with the connection. "The final inspection passed this morning. The grand opening is officially a go for next week." Ellis frowned. She'd already told him the good news over the phone an hour ago. Why was she leaving him a voicemail about it? And why was she calling him Tasha? Then the cold dread began to pool in his stomach. This message was not for him. This was a colossal mistake, a digital misfire that was about to change everything. He heard the distinct clink of a wine glass in the background of the call. Then Latasha's muffled voice on the other end, though Kenya must have had her on speaker. Kenya's next words came out in a triumphant rush. "I know, right? 2 years of his blood, sweat, and tears. And all that money? Ha! He thinks he's a partner. He has no idea his name isn't on a single piece of paper. Not the deed, not the LLC, nothing. The loan was the only thing I needed him for to secure the rate with his precious credit score. But the salon's mine, baby. His money, my name, 100%. He's a sweet, dumb mule, and he just finished carrying all my gold to the finish line." There was a pause, filled with Latasha's high-pitched, sycophantic laughter. "He even installed the last of the $400 sconces yesterday, bless his heart. Now I just have to play the role of the grateful wife for a little while longer, at least until the business is stable. Then, well, you know the plan." The voicemail ended. The silence that followed was louder than any sound Ellis had ever heard. The sunlight streaming into his condo suddenly felt cold and invasive. He looked at his hands, the hands that had sanded drywall, run electrical wiring, and assembled dozens of flat-packed Salon stations. They were trembling. 2 years, $126,000 of his savings, and 63 seconds of truth. What do you do when the foundation of your life is revealed to be a lie? When you realize the person you've been building a future with was only building one for herself? Tell us in the comments if you've ever faced a betrayal that changed everything in an instant. The facade had been constructed with the same meticulous care as the salon itself. For 2 years, their life was a testament to shared dreams and mutual support, or so Ellis had believed. It started with a coffee at a small cafe on West 25th Street, where Kenya, her deep brown skin glowing under the morning light, had sketched her vision on a flimsy napkin. Kenya's Crown, she'd called it. A high-end salon in the heart of Ohio City, a place for black women to feel celebrated, with top-of-the-line equipment and an atmosphere of pure luxury. Ellis, who had always admired her ambition, was captivated. Her passion was infectious. "I'll help you," he'd said, his words simple but absolute. He had no idea how she would take that promise and twist it into a weapon against him. The financial support began immediately. The first withdrawal from his personal savings account, an account he'd been building since he was 22, was for $30,000. It was the down payment for the commercial space, a dilapidated former bakery on Lorraine Avenue that cost $150,000. "It's an investment in us, baby," Kenya had said, kissing him as she held up the cashier's check. Her lips were soft, but her eyes, he now realized, held a glint of something cold and calculating. He transferred the money without a second thought. Over the next 24 months, he would make dozens more transfers, meticulously documented in his banking app. There was $15,000 for the architectural plans and permits, another $25,000 for the initial construction materials, lumber, drywall, and insulation from Home Depot, the receipts for which he still had in a folder in his home office. Their weekends ceased to be their own. They became a blur of dust and labor. Ellis, who spent his weekdays in the quiet, air-conditioned world of finance, transformed into a contractor on Saturdays and Sundays. He bought a pair of $150 Red Wing work boots and a $250 DeWalt tool set. He spent an entire month every single weekend demolishing the old interior of the bakery. He hauled load after load of crumbling plaster and rotted wood in a rented U-Haul pickup truck that cost $29.95 a day, plus mileage. He remembered one Saturday in July, the air thick and humid, sweat stinging his eyes as he wrestled with a section of stubborn wall. Kenya had arrived around noon, not in work clothes, but in a stylish $350 sundress and sandals. She brought him a bottle of water and a kiss on his sweaty forehead. "My hero," she'd cooed, holding her $900 Louis Vuitton purse away from the dust. She stayed for 10 minutes, took a few pictures for her Instagram feed with the caption, "Building Our Empire, Boss Babe, Langers, Jorn Couple Goals," and then left to meet Latasha for a $120 brunch at the Harp. Ellis had watched her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car he helped her get a loan for, disappear down the street. He felt a flicker of resentment then, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the facade. But he'd pushed it down. He told himself she was the visionary, the brand. He was the support. That was his role. The spending escalated as the vision became more luxurious. Kenya had a taste for the expensive, and she justified every purchase as essential for the brand. "We can't have cheap-looking chairs, Ellis. This is about an experience," she'd argued one evening, showing him a catalog. The 6 styling chairs she wanted were custom-made Italian imports, costing a staggering $4,800 each, a total of $28,800. Ellis had balked. "Kenya, that's more than a down payment on a house. We can find something just as good for a fraction of that." Her face had hardened. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just some neighborhood chop shop. This is Kenya's crown. It has to be perfect. If you believe in me, you'll find a way." The words, "if you believe in me," were her trump card, and she played it often. He ended up liquidating $30,000 from a mutual fund he'd held for a decade, taking a hit on the capital gains tax just to pay for those chairs. He felt sick doing it, but the sight of her ecstatic smile when the delivery truck arrived made him believe for a moment that it was worth it. He remembered the arguments, small at first, then more frequent. They were always about money and his perceived lack of vision. He'd suggest a more affordable flooring option, a durable 4 per square foot luxury vinyl tile. She would insist on imported 18 per square foot porcelain. He'd point out that the budget was stretched thin. She would accuse him of not supporting her dream. "It's always the budget with you, Ellis," she'd snapped one night over a dinner of takeout pizza he'd paid for. "You think like a banker. I think like an entrepreneur. You wouldn't understand." The insult hung in the air between them. He, the man funding her entire entrepreneurial venture, didn't understand. Latasha was a constant presence, always on the periphery, always whispering in Kenya's ear. She was the chief enabler, a woman whose own life was a series of failed ventures and who seemed to live vicariously through Kenya's ambition. Whenever Ellis raised a concern, Kenya would say, "I was talking to Tasha, and she agrees with me." Tasha thought the $8,000 custom-built reception desk was a non-negotiable statement piece. Tasha thought the $5,000 sound system was essential for the vibe. Ellis saw Latasha for what she was, a cheerleader with no skin in the game, encouraging his wife to spend his money with reckless abandon. He tried to talk to Kenya about it once. "It just feels like Latasha's opinion matters more than mine sometimes," he said gently. Kenya had laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Don't be ridiculous. Tasha is my best friend. She understands the vision. You understand the spreadsheets. It's different." The final major expense was the signage, a custom backlit sign that spelled out Kenya's crown in a flowing, elegant script. The quote was for $12,000. By this point, Ellis's savings were nearly depleted. He had poured every last disposable dollar into the project. "We can't afford this, Kenya," he'd said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "We'll have to wait." She had started to cry. Not real tears, he now understood, but performative, manipulative tears. "After everything I've worked for? The sign is the first thing people will see. It has to be perfect. I thought you wanted this for me." That night, he'd applied for a personal loan of $15,000, lying on the application about its purpose. The irony was not lost on him, a loan officer committing loan fraud to fund the final piece of his own financial ruin. The day the sign was installed, Kenya threw a small party for her friends. Ellis was there, but he felt like a ghost, an invisible benefactor. Kenya stood under the glowing sign, a glass of champagne in her hand, and gave a toast. "To my vision," she said, her voice ringing with pride. "And to making dreams come true." She never once mentioned his name. She never acknowledged his 2 years of labor, his sleepless nights, his emptied bank accounts. He was just the man in the background, clapping along with everyone else, a sweet, dumb mule who had just carried the gold to the finish line. The 63 seconds of the voicemail replayed in his mind on a continuous, torturous loop. He sat in the armchair for over an hour, the phone clutched in his hand, his knuckles white. The sun moved across the sky, and the shadows in his living room grew long and distorted. He felt a profound, chilling stillness settle over him. There was no rage, no shouting, no desire to break things. The betrayal was too complete, too surgical. It was a cancer that had been growing for 2 years, and he had just been handed the terminal diagnosis. His mind, trained to see patterns and risks, began to work. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was a loan officer analyzing a catastrophic default. He stood up and walked to his home office, a small, neat room where he kept his financial records. He bypassed the shared folder labeled Salon Project and went straight to his personal files. He pulled out the thick manila envelope containing the closing documents for the Tremont condo. He'd bought it in 2015, 3 years before he'd even met Kenya. The deed was solely in his name, Ellis James Carter. It was premarital property, a firewall. That was the first piece of solid ground in a world that had turned to quicksand. Next, he logged into his online banking portal. He went back 2 years, meticulously exporting every single statement, every transaction. He highlighted each transfer to their joint account that was immediately followed by a withdrawal for the salon. He tagged every check written to contractors, every debit card purchase from hardware stores. He created a new spreadsheet, not with budgets and projections, but with a cold, hard accounting of his own money. $30,000 for the down payment, $15,000 for permits, $25,000 for materials, $28,800 for chairs, $12,000 for the sign. He added up the smaller expenses, the $800 for the paint sprayer, the $2,000 for specialized plumbing fixtures, the endless $100 and $200 trips to Lowe's. The total at the bottom of the column made his breath catch in his throat. 126,417.22s. He had bled over $100,000 of his future into her lie. Then he remembered the loan. The big one. The $100,000 small business loan they had taken out to cover the final build-out and initial operating costs. He had co-signed it. His 810 credit score and his position at a rival credit union were the only reasons they'd been approved. Kenya's credit was mediocre at best. At the time, she'd cried with gratitude. "We couldn't have done this without you," she'd said. She'd used the word we. He now understood that we meant his credit and her gain. He pulled up the loan documents, which he had saved as a PDF. There it was. His signature, clear as day, right next to hers. Co-borrower. Legally, he was just as responsible for that debt as she was, but it was also his proof. It was the undeniable, legally binding evidence of his financial stake in the business. He saved the PDF to a new, encrypted folder on his desktop. He named the folder Evidence. His final act of this initial discovery phase was the most important. He took a deep breath and navigated to the voicemail on his phone. He used a third-party app he'd downloaded years ago, one that cost $4.99, to record the voicemail as an MP3 file. He then emailed the file to his personal, private email address. He backed it up to a cloud drive. He then saved it to a brand new $30 USB flash drive that he kept in his desk drawer. He labeled the file, Exhibit a Kenya Voicemail 1015 MP3. He listened to it one more time, not with the ears of a wounded husband, but with the ears of a litigator. "The salon's mine, baby. His money, my name." It was a perfect confession. Cold, clear, and utterly damning. He finally closed his laptop. The digital trail was secure. The plan began to form in his mind. Not a plan of revenge, but a plan of extraction. A quiet, methodical, and total recovery of what was his. The time for emotion was over. It was time for procedure. The art of playing dumb is a delicate one. It requires a level of self-control Ellis never knew he possessed. When Kenya walked through the door of their Tremont condo at 6:15 p.m. that Sunday, he was in the kitchen, calmly stirring a pot of pasta sauce. The scent of garlic and basil filled the air, a scent that had always meant home, but now felt like a theatrical set piece. He had arranged his face into a mask of placid normalcy. "Hey, baby," she said, dropping her keys, the ones for his condo, into a small ceramic bowl by the door. She was glowing, flushed with the success of her day. "Smells amazing in here." She came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. Her touch felt like a spider crawling on his skin. He had to use every ounce of his willpower not to flinch. "Just making your favorite," he said, his voice even, betraying none of the turmoil inside him. "How was the rest of your day? You sounded so excited on the phone earlier." He was testing her, seeing how deep the deception went. "Oh, it was great," she said, pulling away to pour herself a glass of wine. "Just a few last-minute things to sort out. Tasha came by, and we just gamed out the whole grand opening week. It's going to be epic." She didn't mention the phone call, the accidental voicemail. She had no idea. The casualness of her lie was breathtaking. She sat at their small kitchen island, sipping her $40 bottle of Pinot Noir, and talked for 20 minutes about floral arrangements and press releases, all while Ellis served the pasta and grated Parmesan cheese. He listened, nodded, and asked the right questions. He was an actor giving the performance of his life. Inside, he was a silent, screaming void. Each word she spoke was another shovel of dirt on the grave of their marriage. He felt nothing but a cold, clear focus. He just needed to get through the next 48 hours. Monday morning was the next test. He woke up at his usual 6 a.m. Kenya was still asleep, one arm thrown over his side of the bed. He carefully slid out from under it and went through his morning routine with robotic precision. He showered, dressed in a crisp $120 Brooks Brothers shirt and gray slacks, and made coffee. He packed his lunch, a turkey sandwich on wheat and an apple, the same lunch he'd packed for years. At 7:30 a.m., he kissed her goodbye as she stirred in bed. "Have a good day at the bank, honey," she murmured sleepily. "You too," he said. "Big week for you." The words felt like ash in his mouth. He didn't go to the bank. Not his branch, anyway. His first stop was a different branch of his own credit union, one on the other side of town where no one knew him personally. He walked in at 8:05 a.m. and sat down with the branch manager, a woman he'd met once at a company-wide meeting. He explained in calm, professional tones that he needed to freeze a joint checking account due to potential fraudulent activity. He didn't elaborate. As a co-owner of the account, he had every right. He filled out the paperwork, his hand steady. The account held $18,450, the last of his liquid savings, which he had deposited 2 weeks prior to cover the salon's first month of payroll and rent, at Kenya's tearful request. The manager processed the freeze immediately. A digital wall went up around that money. It was now inaccessible to Kenya. That was the first move on the chessboard. His second stop was an appointment he had made from his car just minutes earlier. He walked into the downtown Cleveland offices of a law firm, a place of polished wood and hushed tones that smelled of money and serious problems. He sat across from a man named Marcus Thorne, a highly recommended divorce attorney whose online profile said his specialty was complex asset division. Thorne was a sharp, impeccably dressed black man in his 50s, with a calm, discerning gaze. He listened without interruption as Ellis laid out the entire story, from the napkin sketch 2 years ago to the voicemail yesterday. Ellis didn't editorialize or get emotional. He presented the facts as if he were presenting a loan application for review. He concluded by sliding his phone across the large mahogany desk. "This is the voicemail," he said. "I have it backed up in 3 separate locations." Marcus Thorne put the phone to his ear and listened. His expression didn't change, but when the 63 seconds were over, he placed the phone back on the desk with a quiet finality. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice low and serious. "In 25 years of practicing law, I have rarely seen a piece of evidence so clear, so unambiguous, and so self-incriminating. Her own words will be the anvil that breaks her." He quoted his retainer fee, $10,000, billed against a rate of $650 per hour. Ellis didn't hesitate. He pulled out his personal credit card. "When can we file?" he asked. Thorne smiled, a thin, predatory smile. "I can have the petition drafted by tomorrow. We can file on Wednesday morning. We'll include a full transcript of the voicemail as an exhibit. We'll also file an emergency motion to prevent any liquidation or transfer of business assets." Ellis spent the rest of Monday and all of Tuesday in a surreal state of dual existence. At work, he was the consummate professional, approving car loans and counseling members on mortgages. At night, he was the loving husband, listening to Kenya's frantic, excited plans for the grand opening on Saturday. She complained on Tuesday evening that the joint account card was declined when she tried to pay the caterer's $2,500 deposit. "It's so weird," she said, annoyance coloring her voice. "I called the bank and they said there's a security hold. Can you handle it tomorrow? I'm too swamped." Ellis looked her straight in the eye. "Don't worry," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of reassurance. "I'll take care of it." He had no idea what was coming. The strike was planned with the precision of a military operation. Wednesday, October 18th, was D-Day. At 9 a.m., Marcus Thorne's paralegal filed the divorce petition with the Cuyahoga County Courthouse. The petition was thick with evidence. It included the complete transcript of the voicemail, copies of Ellis's bank statements showing the $126,417.22 in transfers, and a copy of the co-signed $100,000 business loan agreement. It was a financial kill shot, documented and notarized. The true genius of Marcus Thorne's strategy, however, was in the timing of the service. "We don't want to just inform her," Thorne had said in their meeting. "We want to disrupt her. We want to serve her at a moment when her arrogance is at its peak." Kenya had an interview scheduled for 11 a.m. on Wednesday with a reporter from a popular Cleveland lifestyle blog. She was going to be at the Salon, preening for the camera, telling the story of her journey as a self-made entrepreneur. That was the moment Thorne chose. At 11:15 a.m., a professional process server, a nondescript man in a gray windbreaker, walked into Kenya's crown. The salon was immaculate. The $28,800 Italian leather chairs gleamed under the soft glow of the $400 sconces Ellis had installed. The air smelled of expensive hair products and fresh paint. Kenya was in the middle of her interview, sitting in one of her prized chairs, laughing with the reporter. Latasha was there, of course, hovering in the background, playing the role of the loyal chief of staff. The process server walked directly up to Kenya. "Are you Kenya Carter?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Kenya, annoyed at the interruption, gave him a dismissive look. "I am. Can't you see I'm in the middle of something?" The man didn't flinch. "I have a legal document for you," he said, holding out a thick envelope. The reporter stopped recording. The photographer lowered his camera. The entire salon went silent. Kenya's smile froze on her face. She took the envelope, her movement stiff. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's a petition for dissolution of marriage," the server said, then turned and walked out the door. Kenya stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Latasha rushed to her side. "What is it? Is it a joke?" Kenya ripped it open, her manicured fingers tearing the paper. Her eyes scanned the first page. Dissolution of marriage. Ellis Carter, petitioner. Kenya Carter, respondent. Her face went from confused to indignant. "He's divorcing me? Now? He has to be kidding me." She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "The nerve of him, after everything I've built." Then she flipped the page to the attached exhibits. Her eyes fell on Exhibit A. Transcript of voicemail message dated October 15th, 2:34 p.m. She began to read. Her face, a mask of confident beauty moments before, began to crumble. The color drained from her luminous, deep brown skin. She read her own words, words she had spoken in the giddy confidence of a private conversation. "The salon's mine, baby. His money, my name. He's a sweet, dumb mule." Her hands began to shake violently. The papers fluttered to the floor. She looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning animal terror, and met Latasha's gaze. In that moment, she knew. She knew that he knew everything. The lifestyle reporter, sensing a far more interesting story than the one he came for, quietly signaled for his photographer to start taking pictures again. The flash of the camera was like a lightning strike, capturing the precise moment Kenya's perfectly constructed world shattered into a million pieces. The first call to Ellis's phone came at 11:19 a.m. It was Kenya. He was in his office at the credit union, reviewing a mortgage application. He looked at her name on the screen, then silenced the call and let it go to voicemail. A second call came immediately after. He silenced that one too. Then came the texts, a frantic waterfall of blue bubbles on his screen. "Ellis, call me now." "What the hell is this? Are you crazy? You can't do this to me. The grand opening is Saturday. My interview was just ruined. This is humiliation." He read them all, feeling nothing. It was like watching a distant storm, knowing you are safely out of its path. The first voicemail she left was pure, sputtering rage. "Ellis, how dare you? You pull a stunt like this on today of all days. You are trying to ruin me. After 2 years of my hard work, you will regret this. Call me back immediately." He saved the voicemail and labeled it Kenya VM1. An hour later, the second voicemail arrived. The anger had been replaced by a note of confused pleading. "Baby, please. There has to be a mistake. That voicemail, I don't know what that is. It must be fake. We can talk about this. We can fix this. Just call me, please. I'm at the salon and people are staring. I love you." He saved it. Kenya VM2. The third voicemail came late that afternoon. The tone had shifted to sheer panic. "Ellis, the bank account is frozen. I can't pay anyone. The caterer, the DJ for the party, they're all calling me. The deposit for the liquor license is due tomorrow. What did you do? Ellis, please. My whole business, everything is going to fall apart. You can't let this happen. This was our dream." He saved it. Kenya VM3. The use of the phrase "our dream" was particularly galling. He felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a detached clinical interest in her psychological collapse. He forwarded all 3 voicemails and the screenshots of her texts to Marcus Thorne with a simple subject line, FYI. The response from his lawyer was immediate. "Excellent. Keep ignoring her. Let her unravel." The consequences of Kenya's deception cascaded with brutal speed and efficiency. Her downfall wasn't a slow decline, it was a financial and social implosion, each stage triggered by the previous one. The first and most immediate consequence was the frozen joint account. The $18,450 that Kenya had considered her operating buffer was gone. On Thursday morning, the day after she was served, her 2 newly hired stylists, a promising young woman named Brianna and an experienced professional named Denise, arrived at the salon expecting their first paychecks. Kenya had to face them, her face pale and drawn, and admit she couldn't pay them. She tried to explain it away as a banking error, a mix-up that her husband was handling. But the gossip from the reporter's disastrous visit had already begun to circulate through Cleveland's tight-knit beauty community. Brianna and Denise exchanged a look. They had families to feed. By the end of the day, they had both quit, politely but firmly. The cost of her deception? 2 key employees, lost before the doors even officially opened. The second domino to fall was the grand opening party. It was scheduled for Saturday night and was meant to be her triumphant debut. She had spent over $8,000 of Ellis's money on it, a $12,500 catering deposit, a $500 DJ, a $1,000 open bar tab, plus invitations and decorations. With the account frozen, she couldn't pay the remaining balances. The caterer called on Thursday and canceled. The DJ followed suit. On Friday, she had to send out a humiliating email to the 100-plus people on her guest list, announcing the postponement of the grand opening due to unforeseen circumstances. The cost? An $8,000 non-refundable loss and a massive blow to her credibility. Kenya's crown, the most anticipated salon opening in Ohio City, was now a public failure before it had served a single client. The third and most devastating blow came from the bank that held the $100,000 business loan. Because Ellis was a co-signer and an employee of a rival, respected credit union, his lawyer was able to communicate directly with the bank's legal department. Thorne presented them with the evidence: the divorce filing, the proof of financial fraud, and the transcript of the voicemail where Kenya explicitly stated her intent to defraud a co-signer. The bank's risk management department acted swiftly. They saw a business that was non-operational, had no employees, and was embroiled in a fraud-based divorce. They invoked a clause in the loan agreement regarding material misrepresentation. The following week, they sent a formal letter to the Salon's address. The bank was calling the entire $100,000 loan due in full within 30 days. If it wasn't paid, they would begin foreclosure proceedings to seize the business and its assets, the very assets Ellis had paid for. The cost, her entire line of credit, the financial lifeblood of the business, was severed. Latasha, the ride-or-die best friend and chief conspirator, was the next to abandon ship. Once the reality of the financial ruin set in, her fawning support vanished. She saw that the dream of being the salon manager, of basking in Kenya's reflected glory, was dead. More than that, she feared being dragged into the legal mess. After a screaming match with Kenya in the empty salon, where Kenya accused her of being a fair-weather friend, and Latasha accused Kenya of being a fool who got caught, Latasha walked out. She stopped answering Kenya's calls. She unfollowed her on social media, the cost of the fallout. Her only ally, gone. The legal battle itself was short and brutal. Kenya tried to fight, hiring a cheap lawyer who was completely outmatched by Marcus Thorne. She claimed Ellis was an investor, not a partner, and that his money was a gift. Thorne destroyed that argument in mediation by simply playing the 63-second voicemail. The mediator listened, looked at Kenya, and advised her to settle immediately. The final settlement was a complete victory for Ellis. The court ordered the forced sale of the salon. The proceeds were to be split in a very specific way. First, the $100,000 bank loan was to be paid off in full, releasing Ellis from all liability. Second, from the remaining funds, Ellis was to be reimbursed his entire documented investment of $126,417.22. Whatever was left over, if anything, would go to Kenya. The salon, with its toxic reputation and distressed sales status, sold for a paltry $240,000. After the bank was paid, that left $140,000. Ellis received his $126,417.22. Kenya, after 2 years of scheming, walked away with just $13,582.78. She had to use that money to pay her own legal fees. She lost the business, she was saddled with debt, her reputation was in tatters, and her grand dream ended in public humiliation and financial ruin. The sweet, dumb mule had kicked, and the entire rotten structure she had built came crashing down. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace and financial security? Share your story with our community below. We can all learn from each other's strength and resilience. A year and a half later, Ellis sat on a bench at Edgewater Park, watching the sun dip below the horizon of Lake Erie. The sky was a brilliant canvas of orange and purple, and a cool breeze drifted off the water. He was 40 pounds lighter, the result of rediscovering his love for running along the lakefront trails. The stress and weight of the last 2 years of his marriage had literally been shed from his body. He felt a sense of peace that was so profound, it was almost physical. His Tremont condo, once a place of tense silence and unspoken resentments, was now his sanctuary. He had repainted the walls, bought new furniture that was comfortable and unpretentious, and filled the space with things he loved: books on history and finance, local art from the 78th Street studios, and a high-quality turntable on which he played old jazz records. The condo had been his anchor, the premarital asset that the court couldn't touch, and it had become the foundation of his new life. He had kept it, and in doing so, he had kept a part of himself that existed long before Kenya. The settlement money, all $126,417.22 of it, was back in his investment accounts, working for him, not for a lie. He looked at his finances not with bitterness, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood now, more than ever, the power of financial literacy and ownership. This understanding sparked a new passion in his professional life. He pitched an idea to his superiors at Rock Valley Credit Union, a mentorship program for young, aspiring loan officers, specifically targeting Black and minority candidates from Cleveland's underserved neighborhoods. He wanted to teach them not just the mechanics of banking, but the philosophy of building real, sustainable community wealth. The credit union, impressed by his initiative, approved the program and made him its director. Now he spent 2 afternoons a week working with a small cohort of apprentices. He taught them how to read a credit report, how to structure a small business loan, and how to spot predatory lending practices. But more than that, he taught them how to empower their future clients. Your job isn't just to approve or deny a loan, he told them during a session. It's to build a relationship based on trust and transparency. When you help someone buy their first home or start their first business on a solid foundation, you're changing the trajectory of a family for generations. Seeing the understanding dawn in their eyes gave him a satisfaction deeper than any commission ever had. He was no longer just managing debt. He was building futures. He rarely thought of Kenya. He had heard through the grapevine that she had moved out of state, somewhere down south, humbled and in debt. Her name was a whisper of a cautionary tale in the Ohio City business scene. He felt no anger toward her anymore, no desire for further retribution. The consequences of her own actions had been her sentence. Forgiving her wasn't about absolving her. It was about releasing himself from the weight of her betrayal. He had his own life to build. As the last sliver of the sun disappeared, casting a final golden glow on the water, Ellis stood up from the bench. He took a deep breath of the clean, cool air. He had learned a hard lesson, one that cost him 2 years and over $100,000. He learned that true wealth isn't measured by expensive chairs or glowing signs. It's not about the facade you build for others to see. True wealth is integrity. It's the peace you feel at the end of the day. It's building something, whether it's a career or a life, on a foundation of truth, not on the back of someone else's trust. His money, his name. That was his new motto. He smiled, turned away from the magnificent sunset, and began the quiet, peaceful walk home. What do you think is the most important foundation for a successful life? Is it money, integrity, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of truth and triumph.